The first time I heard the bell, I was standing in a village that should have been asleep. The air was still, the moon pale, the streets empty, and yet the tower loomed like a wound against the sky. Its stone was blackened from old fire, its roof broken, its windows hollow. No priest had served there for decades, no worshippers had walked its aisles. The villagers whispered that it was cursed ground. They were not wrong. The bell rang. The sound rolled across the rooftops with the weight of thunder. Not the clear tone of bronze or iron, but something older, deeper, as if the bell itself was a throat. One strike, then another, then a third. Each chime carried with it a heaviness that pressed on the chest, that slowed the breath. Somewhere behind shuttered windows, I heard a muffled sob. The villagers knew better than to pray when the bell spoke. They had already buried too many. The rule was simple: never hear more than 3. I pressed my hand against the pouch at my belt. Inside was earth from consecrated ground, mixed with my own blood, enough to bind my shadow when the time came. That was another rule. If the bell called and your shadow left you, it would never return. I scanned the street. The silence, after the third strike, was worse than the sound. From the edge of my vision, I caught movement near the tower. A figure, taller than a man, stretched wrong. Its spine bent where no spine should bend, and its shadow slid across the ground in the opposite direction of the moonlight. I did not move. My heart pounded, but I knew better than to call attention to myself. A true name spoken under the bell was a summons, and what answered was never merciful. The figure paused, its head tilted as if listening. Then it drifted toward the cemetery behind the tower, gliding without steps. I let my breath escape, slow and steady, though the air felt poisoned. A whisper came at my ear. "You saw it." I turned, blade ready, but it was not a demon. It was Brother Logan. He crouched in the shadows, eyes wide, lips trembling. He was younger than me by decades, and his fear showed in every line of his face. "I told you to stay back," I murmured. "Father Anthony sent me. He said I follow, I learn, I obey," Logan said. His voice was defiant, but his hands shook. "Then obey. No names, no sound. We wait." The two of us remained still until the shadow figure disappeared among the gravestones. Only then did Logan draw a deeper breath. His exhale shuddered, too loud, but the night did not answer. "What was it?" he whispered. "The villagers call it the Harvester," I said. Speaking the name tasted like rust. "It takes whatever the bell calls, and the bell always calls something." Logan swallowed. His youth betrayed him. "Why 3 chimes? Why not more?" "Because 4 means you are already dead." A scream rang down the street. It was short, cut off as quickly as it began. Logan jerked to move, but I caught his arm. "Do not break the line," I said. I pointed down. At our feet, faint in the dirt, was the circle of ash I had drawn before the bell rang. It was a fragile thing, a line of faith more than fire, but it was enough. Another rule: always mark your ground before the first strike. Logan stared at the circle, then back toward the street where the scream had come from. His breathing was harsh, but he did not cross the line. That saved him. Silence returned. The inn behind us was dark. The village waited like prey frozen in the grass, hoping the predator would move on. The bell was still, the night deep, the air heavy with the memory of sound. Logan whispered, "How do we fight it?" I watched the broken tower, its silhouette jagged against the sky. In one of the high windows, something shifted, slow and deliberate, like lungs drawing breath. "We follow the rules," I said. My voice was quiet, but inside me the certainty felt thin. The rules had saved me many times before. They were the foundation of the brotherhood, the reason we survived when others did not. But the Harvester knew the rules too. Perhaps it had written them Logan did not answer. His face was pale in the moonlight. His shadow stretched long at his feet. I pressed my hand once more to the pouch at my belt, grounding myself. The night was not finished. The bell would ring again. At dawn, the village looked almost ordinary. Smoke rose from chimneys. Chickens scattered across the dirt road. Children carried buckets from the well. But if you watched long enough, you noticed the silences. No one looked toward the tower. No one spoke of the night. They moved with a discipline born of fear. Their lives had been shaped by the rhythm of a bell they could not escape. Logan walked beside me, his face still pale from the night. He had tried to sleep, but I had heard him tossing in the small room of the inn. Fear lingers in the young. It teaches fast, but it leaves scars. We met Father Anthony in the chapel at the far edge of the village. The chapel was not abandoned like the tower. It was small, plain, its walls whitewashed, its altar bare. But the air carried a weight of old incense and prayers whispered for centuries. Father Anthony stood before the altar, a tall man with shoulders bent by age but not weakness. His eyes were sharp, his hands steady as he held a rosary that looked older than the church itself. "You both heard it," he said. His voice was low, not a question. "Yes," I replied. Logan hesitated, then nodded. Father Anthony's gaze settled on him. "And you saw?" "I saw something," Logan said. "It was not human." "Nothing that answers the bell is human," Father Anthony said. He let the rosary fall against his chest. "Sit." We obeyed. Sister Sarah entered then, carrying a stack of old books. She was not young, but her steps were light, and her eyes carried the sharpness of memory. She laid the books on the altar and opened one. The pages were worn, ink faded, but the drawings were clear. A tower, a bell, and shadows wrapped around kneeling figures. "The bell-keepers were formed for one purpose," she said, "to guard the laws that bind the harvester. We do not destroy it. We cannot, but we can keep it chained. That chain is the rules." She tapped the page with a thin finger. 3 rules passed down since the tower was first built. The first you already know. Never hear more than 3 strikes. The bell is a gate, and each note opens it wider. By the 4th, the gate is open enough for death to pass through freely. Logan shifted in his seat. His jaw tightened. "The second rule," Sarah continued, "is to bury your shadow when the bell calls. The bell seeks to strip a soul of its tether. The shadow is that tether. If it leaves you, the harvester claims you. Holy earth mixed with your own blood anchors it." I touched the pouch at my belt. The earth inside felt heavier for her words. "The third," she said, "is never to speak a true name within the circle of the bell. Names hold power. To call a brother by his name when the bell rings is to hand him over. The harvester listens. It always listens." The chapel was quiet when she finished. The sound of children outside, faint and distant, only made the silence deeper. Logan broke it. "That is all? 3 rules against something that kills every time it chooses?" Father Anthony's eyes narrowed. 3 rules that have kept us alive for centuries. They are not suggestions. They are chains forged in blood. Break them, and you are lost. Logan looked down, his fists clenched. His fear was turning to anger. It was common. The young often believed strength alone could fight what was older than empires. I had once believed the same. Father Anthony turned his gaze to me. "You saw more than a shadow." "Yes," I said. "It moved as if it searched. It paused near us. It knew we were there." Anthony's lips pressed tight. "The harvester grows restless. The deaths in this village have not satisfied it. The bell should not ring so often. Something has changed." Sarah closed the book. "Perhaps the binding weakens." "That is why you are here, Henry," Anthony said, "and why Logan must learn fast. The tower is not just a ruin, it is a prison. If the walls crack, the rules alone may not hold." Logan lifted his head. Then let us fight it. Anthony's gaze hardened. You fight shadows with steel? With fists? No, you fight them with obedience. You fight them by remembering that the rules are stronger than pride. Logan's jaw tightened, but he did not answer. The rosary clicked in Anthony's hand. Tonight you will return to the tower. You will watch again. And you will remember. The bell is not just sound. It is command. It tests your faith. Fail once, and it will know you forever. The air in the chapel seemed to thicken. I felt the weight of the words like chains on my shoulders. I had carried them for half my life. They had kept me alive, yes, but they had also carved pieces out of me. Sarah gathered her books. I will prepare the texts. There are signs in the tower stone, marks that may tell us if the seal has broken. Study them well. They were written in blood older than ours. The sun rose higher, its light spilling across the chapel floor. For a moment the place felt almost safe, but the tower loomed beyond the village, black against the sky, and the silence around it promised that night would come again. The path to the tower was older than the village. Roots broke through the stones, and the air grew colder with every step. By dusk the streets were empty, shutters barred, candles blown out. The villagers did not watch us go. They knew better than to look at the tower after sunset. Logan walked close, his shoulders tight, his hands flexing near the hilt of his blade. He had been silent since the chapel. The rules had unsettled him. He wanted action, not chains. I remembered the same hunger in myself years ago, the foolish belief that a strong arm could silence what lives in shadows. That hunger had left graves behind. We reached the field before the tower as the sky turned black. The tower rose from the earth like a broken tooth. Its stone was scorched, its windows jagged, its roof half collapsed. Crows perched along the ledges, but they did not caw. They sat still like painted figures. Stay close, I told Logan. The bell does not forgive distance. He nodded, jaw clenched. His shadow stretched long in the moonlight, brushing against mine. I knelt and opened the pouch at my belt. Inside was the consecrated earth, dark and damp with the blood I had offered. I pressed it into the soil at my feet, smearing a circle wide enough for both of us. Logan hesitated, then cut his palm with a small blade. His blood fell into the dirt. Bury your shadow, I said. He pressed his stained hand into the ground, his breath sharp. The soil absorbed it greedily. The shadows around our feet grew still, pinned to us like iron chains. The second rule, obeyed. A sound echoed across the field, not the bell, a whisper, thin as thread, winding through the grass. Words in no tongue I knew, yet I understood them. They promised relief, the easing of fear, the comfort of forgetting. Logan swayed. Count, I ordered. He blinked at me. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. My voice was steady. Do it. His lips moved, his eyes cleared. The whisper faded. The bell had not rung yet, but already the tower tested us. The first strike came. It shook the earth, rattled the air in our lungs. The crows launched into the night without sound. Logan clutched his head. A thin line of blood ran from his ear. Do not move, I said. The second strike followed, deeper, slower. The stone of the tower vibrated, and I felt it in my chest like a hammer against bone. My teeth ached. The shadows along the ground writhed as if alive, reaching toward us, then snapping back against the circle. The third strike fell. The sound was not only heard, it was felt, crawling along the skin like insects. The circle trembled, but held. My shadow pressed against the soil, straining as if it wanted to crawl away. Logan groaned, his body hunched. His shadow tore at the edges of the earth, but the blood held it down. Then silence. The field was still, the air heavy. Logan gasped, sweat running down his face. His ear bled freely now, streaking his cheek. I tore a strip from my cloak and pressed it to his skin. "You kept your shadow," I said. He tried to laugh, but it broke into a cough. Barely. Movement stirred at the base of the tower. Figures stepped from the dark. Not one, not two, but many. They wore no faces, only hollows where features should be. Their bodies were thin, their limbs bent, their shadows stretched wrong. They moved without sound, without breath. Logan reached for his blade. I caught his wrist. "Steel is nothing here," I whispered. "Remember the rules." The faceless figures circled the tower, swaying with the rhythm of the bell still echoing in memory. Their presence gnawed at the edges of the mind. I felt the urge to step toward them, to let go of the circle, to surrender. My hand tightened on the pouch at my belt. One of the figures paused. Its head turned, empty sockets fixed on us. Its shadow stretched across the ground, creeping closer. Reaching for the edge of the circle, I scattered a handful of earth across the line. Where it touched, the shadow recoiled, smoking like flesh against flame. A hiss rose, not from mouths, but from the stone itself. The tower groaned. The figures pulled back, retreating into the dark. Logan slumped, his blade still in his hand, his knuckles white. "They were testing us," he said. "They always test," I answered. The night returned to silence. The tower loomed above us, its black walls swallowing the moonlight. My hand throbbed where the earth had burned against my skin. Logan's face was pale, blood drying at his ear. We had obeyed the rules. We were alive. But the bell would ring again. We returned to the inn before sunrise. The villagers had already gathered in the square. They kept their distance from us, eyes lowered, but I saw the questions in their faces. They had heard the bell too, they always did, and they knew that one of them had screamed during the night. A woman came forward, her hands trembling. She held a small bundle wrapped in cloth. When she opened it, I saw the pale face of a boy no older than 10. His skin was gray, his lips blue. No wound marked him, but his shadow was missing. "He went out to fetch water," she whispered. "I told him not to. I told him. But the bell called." The villagers murmured, some crossing themselves, others looking away. Logan turned aside, his jaw tight. I felt the weight in my chest, heavy and familiar. The harvester did not always kill with violence. Sometimes it simply took, and what it left behind was emptiness. Father Anthony arrived, his cloak stirring the dust. He knelt by the boy, pressing 2 fingers to the cold skin. His lips moved in prayer. When he rose, his eyes were hard. "It feeds more quickly than before," he said. "The rules hold, but the prison weakens. We must see inside the tower." Logan stiffened. "You mean enter it?" Anthony looked at him. "Yes." Logan's mouth opened as if to argue, but he closed it. He had seen enough the night before to know that refusal was not an option. We prepared at the chapel. Sister Sarah brought texts and relics from the shelves. A vial of oil, a crucifix blackened with age, a small jar of salt consecrated by blood. She laid them out with careful hands. "The tower was built over graves," she said, "executed heretics, burned at the stake. The earth is soaked in death. That is why the harvester was bound there. It draws strength from blood spilled unjustly." Her words made Logan pale again. "And you expect us to walk into that?" "You expect yourself to survive without it?" she answered. I took the jar of salt and tied it to my belt. Sarah's eyes met mine. There was fear in them, but also something else. Determination, maybe, or defiance. She had studied the tower all her life. She knew what it meant to face it. By nightfall we stood again before the black stone. The sky was clear, the moon bright. The tower seemed taller than before, its windows gaping like wounds. Anthony raised his hand. "Remember the rules. Inside they matter even more. Do not hear more than 3 strikes. Bury your shadow. Speak no names. If you falter, you will not leave." We crossed the threshold. The air changed as soon as we stepped inside. Cold pressed against the skin, thick as water. The ground was covered in ash, though no fire burned. Broken pews lay scattered, their wood blackened, their edges sharp as teeth. The bell rope hung from the ceiling, swaying without touch. Logan whispered, "How can it still move?" "Because it is not moved by hands," Anthony said. His voice echoed in ways it should not. We advanced. The floor creaked underfoot, though some boards were gone entirely, leaving holes that sank into blackness. I could not see the bottom. Symbols covered the walls, carved deep into the stone. Circles, crosses, lines that spiraled into themselves. Some were filled with dried blood. Sarah paused to study them, her fingers hovering near but not touching. "They have been renewed," she said softly. "Not long ago." Anthony frowned. "By whom?" No one answered. The first strike came. The sound tore through the tower deeper than thunder. Dust rained from the ceiling. Logan gasped, clutching his ears. Blood beaded at his nose, trickling down his lip. I caught his arm before he stumbled into one of the holes. "Bury your shadow," I said. We knelt together, pressing our hands to the soil, smearing blood into the earth. My shadow strained but held. Logan's fought harder, stretching like a beast on a leash, but finally settled. The second strike followed. The rope swayed violently now, though no wind moved. The carvings on the walls glowed faint red, as if fresh blood seeped from them. Sarah covered her mouth, her eyes wide. Figures stirred in the corners, darker than darkness. They rose from the ash, thin limbs bending backward, heads tilting until necks cracked. Their shadows spread across the floor, reaching for us. "Salt," I ordered. Logan scattered a line in front of us. The shadows recoiled. Smoke rising where they touched. The figures hissed, soundless, like breath drawn through broken glass. The third strike fell. The entire tower shuddered. Cracks split across the walls. One of the holes widened, swallowing a broken pew whole. The figures surged forward, pressing against the salt line. Anthony raised the crucifix, his voice booming with words of banishment. The shadows writhed, retreating. Logan clutched his blade, though he knew it would do nothing. His nosebleed worsened, streaking his chin, dripping onto the floor. Then silence. The rope stilled. The glow faded. The figures melted back into the corners. The tower seemed to sigh, its hunger quiet for the moment. We stood in the center of the ruin, breath ragged, bodies trembling. Logan wiped the blood from his face with the back of his hand. His eyes were fever bright. "It will not hold much longer," Sarah whispered. Anthony lowered the crucifix. His face was pale. "No, and someone has been feeding it." The words hung in the dark. We all felt them, heavy as the bell itself. We left the chapel of ruin and climbed the narrow stair that circled the inner wall. The steps were stone, cracked and uneven, worn by centuries of dust and footsteps that should not have been possible. Each step carried the weight of whispers. They rose through the walls like smoke, faint words promising peace, promising freedom, promising the end of fear. Logan pressed his palms to his ears. His teeth clenched. Blood still streaked his face, dried along his cheek. "I cannot keep it out," he said through gritted teeth. "Count," I told him. 7, 6, 5. He obeyed. His voice trembled at first, then steadied. The whispers retreated, but I knew they would return. They always did. We reached a landing halfway up the tower. A great arch opened into what had once been the main chamber. Moonlight poured through the shattered roof, illuminating broken beams and piles of ash. The bell rope dangled above, swaying gently, though no wind touched it. Sister Sarah moved to the wall, her fingers tracing the carvings. "These marks are not only old," she said. "Some were cut this year." Father Anthony joined her, his brow furrowed. "Then someone keeps the seal alive, someone within the brotherhood or once of it." The thought sank deep. Betrayal was always more dangerous than open enemies. Logan wandered toward the center of the chamber, his boots crunching over ash. He froze, then bent down. When he rose, he held a rosary blackened with soot. The beads were cracked, the cross bent. His eyes met mine. "This belonged to Owen," he said. The name hit like a blow. Owen had been one of us once, a keeper sworn to the rules. He had been marked dead years ago in the fire that gutted the tower. To see proof of his presence now was to know he had never truly left. Before I could answer, the floor shook. The rope above snapped taut, and the bell rang once. The sound tore through us. Sarah dropped to her knees, clutching her head. Logan staggered, blood bright at his nose again. Anthony lifted the crucifix, voice rising in prayer. The second strike followed. Stones split across the walls. Ash lifted into the air, swirling like smoke. Shapes formed in the haze, arms too long, faces blank, eyes hollow. They stepped from the ash, their bodies cracking with each movement. I threw salt in a wide arc. The nearest shapes hissed and recoiled, their skin blistering where the grains struck. Logan drew his blade, but Anthony shouted, "Do not break the circle. Steel is useless." The third strike fell. The bell shook the tower to its core. Dust rained from above. A crack split the ceiling, moonlight widening into a jagged wound. The shape surged forward, pressing against the salt line, clawing at the air. One reached close enough that its hand burst into flame, burning without sound. It did not retreat. Logan cursed, raising his blade. I caught his wrist again. "Obey the rules," I snapped. He tore free, his young fury overcoming discipline. He swung the blade. The steel cut the figure's arm, and for a moment it seemed to work. But the wound closed instantly, and the figure lashed out. Its claw raked across Logan's forearm. Blood sprayed, dark and real. He stumbled back, eyes wide, clutching the wound. The figure surged harder, feeding on the scent of blood. Anthony raised the crucifix high. His voice thundered through the chamber, a chant older than scripture. The walls shook with it. The carvings glowed, brighter than before. The figures writhed, smoke pouring from their hollow mouths, and then they dissolved back into ash. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. Logan leaned against the wall, his breath ragged. Blood dripped from his arm, soaking his sleeve. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock. "You see now," I said, kneeling beside him. I bound the wound with a strip of cloth. "Steel is nothing here. You nearly broke the circle. You nearly gave them all of us." His lips parted, but no words came. His pride was bleeding out with his blood. Anthony lowered the crucifix, his hands shaking slightly. "The rules are not superstition," he said. "They are chains. They are all that hold the harvester. Forget them, and we are already dead." Sarah touched the wall where the carvings glowed faintly. Her voice was low, almost reverent. "Someone wanted us to come here. These marks were fresh. Owen, he still serves." The chamber grew colder. The silence deepened until it pressed against the skin. I felt it then. The same presence I had glimpsed outside in the night, watching, waiting. We stood together in the ruin, the bell silent now, but its echo living in our bones. Logan leaned heavy against the wall, his blood dripping into the ash. Sarah closed the book she carried, her hands trembling. Anthony bowed his head in grim silence. The tower was not a prison, it was a mouth, and it was hungry. The silence after the third strike lingered, heavy as stone. Logan leaned against the wall, his arm wrapped in cloth dark with blood. Sister Sarah studied the carvings, lips pressed tight. Father Anthony stood rigid, crucifix still raised, as if expecting the shadows to surge again at any moment. Then footsteps echoed across the chamber. Slow, deliberate, each one a hollow knock against the stone. We turned together. From the far side of the room, a figure emerged from the dust. His robe was scorched, his face marked with long-healed burns, but his stride was steady. He carried no weapon, no book, no relic. Only a rosary dangled from his hand, its beads cracked and blackened. "Owen," Father Anthony said. His voice broke on the name. The figure smiled. The expression twisted against the scars, but his eyes gleamed clear. "You remember me after all," Sarah gasped, stepping back. "Impossible. You died in the fire." "Died?" Owen chuckled, low and bitter. "That is what you were told. Easier to bury me than admit I had chosen differently." Anthony's hand trembled on the crucifix. "You broke your vows." "I broke chains," Owen answered. He stepped closer, and the dust seemed to part for him. "The rules you cling to were never ours. They were given to us, not to keep us safe, but to keep the harvester fed. You call it prison. I call it covenant." Logan pushed himself upright, anger burning through his pain. "You betrayed us." Owen's eyes flicked to him. "Young, brave, so certain you know what betrayal is. Tell me, boy, did the rules save the child buried this morning? Did they save the dozens before him?" Logan faltered, words dying in his throat. Owen spread his hands. "The bell does not kill because of broken rules. The rules ensure it continues, a bargain struck long before our time. As long as the Brotherhood obeys, the harvester feeds slowly, predictably, manageable deaths. But when someone breaks free, when someone questions," his smile deepened, "then the tower awakens." I stepped forward, heat rising in my chest. "And you call that salvation?" "I call it survival," Owen said. His gaze hardened. "When the fire came, I saw the truth. I begged the bell for life, and it answered. It gave me power, not chains, power to endure." Anthony's voice thundered through the chamber. "That power is corruption. The harvester does not give without taking." "True," Owen said. His burned lips curled in a grim smile. "It took my soul. But what has your faith given you, Anthony? What have the rules given any of us except graves?" He lifted the rosary. The beads pulsed faintly with red light. The rope above trembled. Dust fell like snow. Sarah whispered, "He feeds it still." "Yes," Owen said, eyes shining. "And in return, it feeds me." Logan's fury boiled over. He lifted his blade and stepped forward. "You murdered them. All of them." "Logan!" I barked, but he had already crossed the line of salt. Owen raised his hand. Shadows rose from the ash, twisting into coils that lashed around Logan's legs. He fell hard, his sword clattering away. He shouted, struggling, but the shadows tightened like ropes. "Stop!" I shouted. I scattered salt across the floor, but it hissed uselessly, burning away before it touched the shadows. Owen's gaze met mine. "Do you see now, Henry? Rules bind you. The harvester rewards me. My chains are broken." Anthony lifted the crucifix high, his voice rising in the old language. The shadows writhed, faltered, then steadied. Owen flinched, but did not fall. "You cannot banish me," Owen hissed. "The bell has claimed me. I am its voice now." The rope above snapped taut. The bell rang once more. The sound struck like a hammer, though no wind moved it. Sarah screamed, dropping her book. Logan writhed on the floor, blood dripping from his ears. I felt my own knees buckle, my vision blur. I forced myself to count. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The words burned on my tongue, but they anchored me. The figures of ash rose again, crowding the edges of the chamber. Their faces were blank, but their bodies bowed toward Owen as if he were priest and they his congregation. Anthony staggered, crucifix shaking in his hand. His voice cracked. "Owen, you are lost." "No," Owen said softly. "I am found." The figures moved closer. The bell rope swayed violently now, dust raining down like snow. Logan gasped, pinned beneath shadows that bled into his skin. Sarah clutched the book to her chest, whispering fragments of prayers that fell silent against the roar of the bell. I stepped forward, salt pouch in one hand, blade in the other, though I knew steel would do nothing. My voice was steady, though my chest burned. Owen, if you are its voice, then hear me now. I will not obey. For the first time, his smile faltered. The ash figures froze. The bell rope slowed. The silence that followed was deeper than before, pressing against my skull. Owen's eyes narrowed. Then, the harvester will claim you. We stood in the ruin, the bell looming above, the rules shuddering under Owen's defiance. The air inside the chamber thickened until every breath felt like ash. The bell rope swung without wind, each sway groaning like a giant's breath. Owen stood at the center, his scarred face lit by a faint red glow from the rosary in his hand. Around him, the figures of ash gathered, their bodies bent, their hollow eyes fixed on us as though awaiting command. Logan struggled on the floor, his arm bound in coils of shadow that seeped into his wound. Blood dripped freely, pooling black against the stone. He gasped, teeth clenched against the pain, but the more he fought, the deeper the shadows bit into his flesh. "Release him," I said, stepping forward. My voice was steady, though my pulse pounded. Owen tilted his head. "Why would I? He's already half claimed. Let him serve." Anthony raised the crucifix again, his voice rising in the old chant. The words rang against the walls, echoing louder than the bell itself. For a moment, the ash figures faltered, twitching as if struck by invisible blows. But Owen only tightened his grip on the rosary, and the figures steadied once more. "You waste your breath, old man," Owen said. "The rules have chained us long enough. Tonight they end." The bell rope snapped taut. The bell rang, not once, not twice, but in rapid strikes that shook the tower to its bones. The sound tore through my skull. My knees buckled. Sarah screamed, clutching her book to her chest. Anthony dropped to one knee, sweat dripping from his brow as he fought to keep the chant alive. I forced myself to move. Salt burned in my hand. I scattered it wide, the grains flashing faint white as they struck the ground. The nearest ash figures recoiled, their limbs blistering, their hollow mouths opening in silent screams. I lunged to Logan, dragging him into the circle. His blood smeared across the salt, hissing where it touched, but the shadows binding him dissolved for a moment. "Hold on," I said. His eyes met mine, fever bright. He nodded weakly. Owen's laughter echoed, harsh and bitter. "You think earth and blood will stop what I have become? You think a handful of dust can silence the bell?" The rosary in his hand glowed brighter. He lifted it, and the ash figures surged forward. They came like a wave, dozens of them, their limbs stretching, their bodies cracking open with lightless void. The salt line held for a breath, then fractured under their weight. I drew my blade. I knew steel could not kill them, but sometimes steel was all a man had. I swung hard, slicing through one figure's torso. It burst into dust, but another took its place instantly, clawing at my chest. I staggered, the breath ripped from me. Anthony shouted, his chant rising, the crucifix blazing with sudden light. The ash figures shrieked soundlessly, staggering back. Sarah opened her book, her voice trembling but clear as she read the words etched in blood and ink. The walls themselves seemed to answer, glowing faint red, then white. Owen snarled, his scarred face twisting. "You cannot banish me. I am bound to the bell. I am its voice." "Then be silent," Anthony thundered. He thrust the crucifix forward. The light flared, searing across the chamber. For a moment, the ash figures collapsed into dust. For a moment, the bell rope stilled, but Owen stood unmoved. The rosary in his hand pulsed stronger, cracks glowing like embers. His body shuddered, as if bones inside him were breaking and reforming. His shadow stretched impossibly long, reaching up the walls, curling across the ceiling. Logan pushed himself up beside me, his wounded arm shaking. He lifted his blade again. "If steel cannot cut him," he gasped, "then let faith sharpen it." He plunged the blade into the pouch at his belt, coating the steel with blood and consecrated earth. The blade smoked, trembling under the weight of it. Then he charged. Owen raised his hand, shadows lashing out, but Logan's blade struck true. The edge sliced across Owen's chest, leaving a line that smoked and burned. Owen screamed, the sound twisting, layered with voices not his own. The bell boomed once more, shaking the chamber. The walls cracked deeper. Dust rained down. Logan was thrown back by the force, crashing against the stone. His blade clattered away, bent and smoking. He lay still, his breath shallow. Sarah cried out, running to him. Anthony stumbled, crucifix dimming in his hand. My chest burned, my vision blurred, but I stepped forward. "Owen," I said, "you call this freedom. You call this power, but you are nothing more than its servant." His eyes burned red. "And you are its food." The ash figures surged again, filling the chamber, clawing at the floor, the walls, our bodies. I hurled the last of my salt into the air, the grains scattering like sparks. They landed on skin, on shadows, on the cracks in the stone, and each one hissed like fire. The chamber blazed with light and dust and screams that had no mouths. The tower groaned as if alive, every stone trembling. I could barely stand. My body shook, my breath came ragged, but I did not fall. When the light faded, Owen still stood. His chest smoked where the blade had cut, his face twisted in pain, but he smiled through it. "You cannot kill me," he said. His voice was layered now, human and not. "The bell has already chosen." We stood among ash and ruin, blood and dust thick in the air. Logan lay wounded, Sarah held him, Anthony knelt in prayer, and Owen stood defiant in the glow of the bell that would not die. Dust hung in the air long after the echoes of the bell faded. My chest heaved, each breath raw, lungs scraping as though filled with smoke. Logan lay against the wall, his wounded arm pressed tight to his chest, blood soaking the cloth I had bound earlier. His face was pale, but his eyes were open, still burning with stubborn life. Sister Sarah knelt beside him, murmuring words I could not hear, her hands trembling as she tried to steady the bleeding. Father Anthony stood in the center of the chamber, his crucifix heavy in his grasp, his lips moving in silent prayer. Owen leaned against the base of the bell rope. The wound across his chest smoked faintly, but he did not bleed. His skin was cracked, his veins glowing faint red like embers buried under ash. His smile had not faded. "You fought hard," he said, voice layered with echoes, "but the tower is not yours to claim." "It never was." Sarah lifted her head, her eyes sharp despite her fear. "You were supposed to die here, Owen, in the fire. I read the accounts. I copied them with my own hands. But the dates do not match. The marks on these walls are too fresh. Someone kept them alive. Someone kept the seal strong. And it was you." Owen's smile widened. "At last the scholar speaks truth." She rose slowly, clutching the book to her chest. Her voice steadied as she spoke. "You maintained the carvings. You renewed the blood. You kept the harvester fed. But not for us, not for the Brotherhood, for yourself." Owen spread his arms. "Why should I deny it? The bell demanded blood, and I gave it. In return, it gave me life beyond death, power beyond vows. You call it betrayal. I call it clarity." Anthony's voice cut through the chamber. "Clarity. You bartered your soul. You shackled the village to endless death, every scream, every body buried, every shadow stolen. It was your hand that opened the gate." Owen's eyes gleamed red. "And yet I stand, stronger than any of you." Sarah moved to the wall, tracing her fingers over the carvings. "No, she whispered. Not stronger, bound tighter. Look here. I stepped closer. The symbols glowed faintly, red lines etched deep into the stone. At first they seemed random, circles and slashes, but as her hand moved across them, I saw the pattern, a circle incomplete, a line left open. It is not a prison, Sarah said. It is a contract. Each mark is a signature. Each line is an oath. Owen has been renewing them, yes, but not as master, as servant. Owen's expression flickered. Sarah pressed on, her voice stronger. The harvester gave you life, but only as long as you carved its chains into stone. You have not broken free. You have become its scribe, its slave. Owen snarled, the sound twisting, layered with voices. Lies. Anthony's hand trembled, but his eyes lit with grim fire. She speaks truth. You are not its voice. You are its pen. Every mark you cut chained you deeper. The rosary in Owen's hand pulsed brighter, the beads cracking under the strain. His face twisted with fury, his body shuddering. You think I am weak? You think I serve? He raised the rosary high. The bell rope jerked, the chamber shuddered. Cracks split wider along the ceiling, dust raining in choking clouds. The ash figures returned, pouring from the walls, their limbs stretching, their hollow eyes burning faint red. Sarah's voice rang clear, louder than the chaos. Look at the carvings. They are not rules for us. They are rules for it, the harvester. It cannot act freely unless they are written, renewed, obeyed. Without Owen, without the marks, the bell is just a bell. The words pierced through the roar. I felt the weight shift inside me, the truth pressing down. All our lives the Brotherhood had believed the rules protected us, but they had protected the harvester. They were its bindings, yes, but also its feast. Owen roared, his voice breaking into dozens of echoes. Silence! He thrust the rosary forward. Shadows surged like a tide, clawing at the floor, reaching for us. I scattered salt again, but the line faltered. My pouch was nearly empty. Anthony lifted the crucifix, his voice breaking but still strong. Logan pushed himself upright, blade trembling in his wounded hand. Sarah pressed her palm to the carvings, her voice calm despite the storm. If the rules are chains, then we can break them, not by defying them, but by refusing them. Her hand smeared the blood across the incomplete circle, erasing part of the mark. The glow sputtered, then dimmed. Owen screamed, stumbling back as if struck. His body cracked deeper, red light spilling from within. The ash figures faltered, their forms shaking, collapsing into dust. Anthony's prayer rose louder, filling the chamber. Logan staggered forward, raising his blade once more, ready the weak. I moved beside Sarah, steadying her hand as she wiped away another line of blood. The glow died further. The tower groaned like a living thing in pain. The bell rope swung wildly, but the sound never came. Owen fell to his knees, clutching the rosary. His voice was a broken rasp. You fools! Without the rules, nothing will hold it. You think you are free, but you are opening the gate wide. The chamber stilled. His words hung heavy, darker than the silence. Sarah's hand trembled on the wall. Anthony's chant faltered. Logan's blade lowered. We had broken part of the chain. But whether we had weakened Owen or loosed the harvester itself, none of us yet knew. The chamber quivered like the inside of a drum. The carvings on the walls dimmed where Sarah's hand had smeared the blood, but in their place the stone itself began to glow, faint cracks pulsing with deeper light. The tower was breathing, alive with something too large for its walls. Owen crawled across the floor, clutching the broken rosary. His body flickered between flesh and shadow, ribs glowing like iron in a forge. His voice was a rasp filled with fury and fear. You do not understand. You think breaking the rules frees you. It only frees it. Father Anthony's chant wavered, but did not stop. His crucifix burned bright, holding back the tide of ash figures that still clawed weakly from the walls. Sarah pressed her palm against another carving, smearing it, erasing the blood that bound it. Each time she did, Owen shrieked and more cracks split across his skin. The air turned colder, the floor trembling under our feet. From the ceiling came a sound that was not the bell, but something deeper, a growl that shook the marrow of my bones. The harvester was stirring. Logan forced himself upright, his wounded arm shaking, his breath ragged. His eyes met mine, steady despite his weakness. "If it wakes, none of us leave." I gripped his shoulder. "Stay back." He shook his head. "No, this is what we are for." Another carving glowed, brighter than the rest. Sarah pointed to it, her voice urgent. "The seal was never complete. It needs one mark finished, not erased. That is the final lock." Anthony's eyes widened. "To finish it requires a life. A binding always takes what is offered." The truth fell over us like shadow. To close the circle, well, one of us had to die. Owen laughed, his voice broken and cracked. "At last, you see. That was always the true rule. One dies, so the rest endure. That is the bargain you swore to uphold." Anthony's hands trembled on the crucifix. He looked at me, then at Sarah, then at Logan, bleeding against the wall. His lips pressed into a thin line. "I am old. My time is already spent. Let me—" "No," Logan said, stepping forward, blade in his hand though his arm shook. "I am the one who broke the line. I nearly doomed us all. It should be me." Sarah cried out, her face pale. "There must be another way." But I knew there was not. I saw it in the carvings, in the blood smeared on stone, in the cracks glowing deeper with every breath. The harvester's shadow was pressing against the world, and only a binding could hold it back. I stepped between them. "Enough. It is mine to bear. I have carried these rules all my life. If they were chains, then let me be the last link." Anthony's eyes burned with grief, but he did not argue. Sarah's lips trembled, words dying in her throat. Logan tried to protest, but his wound silenced him. I pressed my palm to the final carving. The stone was cold at first, then searing hot, burning into my flesh. Blood welled from my hand, filling the grooves of the incomplete circle. The mark flared to life, brighter than fire. The tower screamed. Owen roared, his body tearing apart as light burst from the cracks in his skin. His voice split into 100, then 1,000, each one shrieking as he was dragged backward, not into the bell, but into the seal itself. His body folded, broke, dissolved into smoke and embers. The rosary fell to the floor, shattering into dust. The ash figures collapsed into heaps of gray. The rope above snapped loose, falling limp, never to move again. The growl in the ceiling silenced, though the air still throbbed with faint echoes. Pain ripped through my chest, fire searing every nerve. I could not breathe, could not see. Only feel the blood pouring from my hand into the stone. The circle closed, glowing bright, then dimming as the light sunk into the walls. The cracks sealed. The tower grew still. Hands gripped me, Logan's, Sarah's, but their touch felt far away. My knees buckled. I collapsed onto the stone floor, the mark of the seal burning into my skin. My vision blurred, faces swimming in shadow. Anthony's voice reached me faintly. "Henry, you held true." Sarah's tears fell hot on my cheek. Logan's grip was strong despite his wound. "Do not leave us," he said, his voice breaking. But the rules had always demanded blood, and now they had mine. The last thing I saw was the circle carved into the floor, no longer red, no longer glowing, but whole at last. Then darkness. When the glow of the seal faded, the tower fell silent. The rope lay slack, the carvings dark. For the first time in centuries, no sound of the bell lingered. I lay on the floor, breath ragged. My hand burned where blood had filled the final mark. At first I thought I was gone, but my chest rose again, my heart still beat. Sarah knelt beside me, eyes wide. "You are alive!" Logan staggered forward, pale and wounded. "You should be dead." Father Anthony lowered the crucifix, his voice heavy. "The seal always takes a life." I lifted my hand. Black veins spiraled from the wound, glowing faintly. They all recoiled. "It did take a life," I rasped. "Mine, but it gave it back." Sarah's face paled. "The harvester marked you." I sat up, pain grinding through my bones. The mark pulsed with each heartbeat. The circle is closed. The village is safe. That is all that matters. Owen was gone, his rosary shattered in the dust. No body remained, only absence. Anthony's eyes were dark with doubt. "You bound it, but you are tethered now, not free." "I was never free," I said. "The rules were never protection, only bargains. And now I carry the price." We left the tower at dawn. The villagers emerged from their homes, astonished to hear no bell. They wept, embracing each other, whispering thanks. To them, the nightmare had ended. But I felt the mark on my hand pulse, faint whispers brushing the edge of thought. That night, far from the village, we rested at an inn. Logan slept. Sarah pored over her books. Anthony prayed in silence. I sat alone, staring at my hand. The black veins had spread past my wrist. The whispers were clearer now, patient, waiting. Sarah's voice broke the quiet. "Henry, will it return?" I met her eyes. She wanted hope. I could not give it. "It never left," I said. The fire cracked. The mark throbbed. I knew then that the hunt was not over. The rules had changed, and so had I.